You're listening to From Stillness, an audiobook for a mind in need of quiet. Have you ever felt completely drained after spending time with others even when you genuinely enjoyed it? You laughed, you connected, you were present. And yet, by the time you got home, every part of you felt worn thin, your mind foggy, your body heavy, as though you'd run a marathon you never signed up for. You tell yourself it shouldn't feel this way. After all, it was just a friendly gathering, a work event, a dinner with people you like. And still, here you are, exhausted, in need of space, in need of silence. You scroll through photos of others who seem to thrive in these very settings, wondering, quietly, what's wrong with me? I used to ask myself that same question again and again. For years, I believed the story the world seemed determined to tell me. That needing solitude was a flaw. That craving quiet meant I was somehow less capable, less social, less successful. We live in a culture that idolizes the extroverted ideal, the bold, the outgoing, the endlessly sociable. And in the shadow of that narrative, introversion often feels like something to fix. Be more outgoing, they say. Push yourself. Put yourself out there more. But what if this is the wrong story entirely? What if your quiet nature isn't a problem to overcome but a wisdom to honor? In a world that never stops speaking, perhaps it is the listeners who hold the greatest strength. In a culture obsessed with constant connection, perhaps it is those who can be still, who know how to connect most deeply. This is the perspective that changed everything for me. And it begins with one deceptively simple question. A question that, once asked, will shift the way you move through the world and the way you understand yourself. Let's begin. From a young age, many of us absorb a silent message. Be more. Be louder. Be brighter. We hear it in the classroom. Why are you so quiet? You should speak up more. We feel it in open-plan offices where the hum of constant chatter leaves no room for thought. We see it in job descriptions that praise dynamic networking skills and extroverted leadership. And somewhere along the way, we begin to believe that our natural rhythm is wrong. That to succeed, we must adapt even at the cost of ourselves. For years, I played along. I pushed myself into environments that drained me. I forced myself to contribute in meetings even when I had nothing meaningful to add, simply to appear engaged. I accepted every invitation, attended every event, ignored the quiet signals my body sent me, because I thought that was the price of belonging, of being seen. But the more I complied with this unspoken expectation, the more I lost touch with my true nature. I became a fragmented version of myself, outwardly performing, inwardly depleted. And still, it never seemed enough. Because here is the truth society often neglects to tell us. Introversion is not a flaw to overcome. It is a different way of moving through the world. When we force ourselves into the mold of extroversion, we not only exhaust ourselves, we diminish our natural strengths. Deep thinking, careful observation, meaningful connection. These are not qualities to be hidden or softened. They are rare gifts, gifts that flourish only when we honor them. Imagine telling an owl to hunt during the day, or a fish to climb a tree. The result is not success. It is struggle. And yet, for many of us, this is the quiet battle we fight daily. Trying to operate on someone else's terms, in someone else's rhythm. And over time, the cost is profound. We lose touch with our energy needs. We disconnect from our authentic selves. We judge ourselves for needing the very things that sustain us: solitude, stillness, space. But there is another way. And it begins with questioning the narrative we've been handed and gently rewriting it in a way that honors who we truly are. The first step? A simple, powerful question that changed the way I approach every interaction. And that is where we'll go next. For many of us, there comes a moment when the strain of pretending becomes too great. A breaking point. Mine arrived after a week of back-to-back networking events. I had done everything the world told me would lead to success. Pushed through discomfort. Put myself out there. Stayed visible, connected, engaged. And I was utterly miserable. Have you ever smiled so long that your face aches? Nodded along to conversations while your mind silently pleads for quiet? Checked your watch, counting down the hours you feel obliged to endure? That was my daily reality. By the end of the week, I collapsed onto my sofa, so depleted I couldn't form coherent thoughts. My mind was fogged, my body heavy, too drained even to watch television. And in that quiet, empty space, a realization surfaced. Something had to change. Not the world, not the expectations of others, but my relationship with myself. We all have our version of this moment. For some, it comes as physical burnout. For others, it's the slow erosion of joy. For many, it's the widening gap between who we pretend to be and who we are beneath the surface. Painful though they are, these breaking points carry a hidden gift. They force us to ask deeper questions. Up to that point, I had been asking the wrong ones. How can I become more extroverted? How can I fit in better? How can I be less awkward in social settings? Questions that framed my introversion as a problem to solve. But one evening, in the quiet after that draining week, a new question emerged, deceptively simple, but quietly radical. What energizes me, and what depletes me? Not a question that sought to fix or change me, but one that honored my nature. When I first asked it, the answers surprised me. Deep one-on-one conversations left me feeling uplifted. Collaborative projects I cared about gave me energy. Teaching others about meaningful topics brought me alive. In contrast, large networking events drained me within minutes. Open office environments left me overstimulated and scattered. Prolonged group interactions without clear purpose depleted me for days. This question didn't judge. It simply invited me to observe with honesty and compassion. And in doing so, it opened a new path. A way of moving through the world that worked with my natural rhythms, not against them. A path where success and authenticity were no longer in conflict. And it all began with 5 simple words. What energizes me and what depletes me? Next, we'll explore how asking this question can transform not just your self-understanding, but the way you design your life. Once I began asking, what energizes me and what depletes me, a new awareness started to unfold. I realized that for much of my life, I had been treating my social energy as if it were infinite, pushing myself through interactions long after my reserves had run dry. And like so many introverts, I mistook this exhaustion as personal weakness. But the truth is far simpler. Our energy is not limitless. It is a finite, precious resource, one that deserves mindful stewardship. Think of your social energy as a battery. Extroverts, by design, often operate with extended battery packs. Their interactions naturally recharge them. Introverts, on the other hand, have standard batteries, perfectly capable of sustaining rich, meaningful engagement, but requiring intentional recharging. Neither is better. They are simply different systems. But knowing your battery capacity is essential for sustainable living. Most of us, though, operate with little to no awareness of our energy levels until we crash. We override the early warning signs. That rising sense of internal noise. The subtle pull towards solitude. The increasing effort required to remain present. We tell ourselves to push through, and then wonder why we need days to recover. I used to repeat this cycle constantly, staying at gatherings until I was running on fumes, then retreating into deep withdrawal. It was only when I began treating my energy with the same respect I gave my time that everything shifted. Here's how I started. I created a simple scale, 1 to 10. 10 is fully charged, alert, calm, open to connection. 1 is complete depletion, foggy, irritable, unable to engage meaningfully. Throughout the day, I began checking in. Where am I on this scale? At 7 or above, I knew I could engage fully. At 4 or below, I recognized the need to recharge. This simple practice transformed my choices. I stopped saying yes to every invitation. I stopped forcing myself to stay in draining environments. I started building in buffer time between social commitments. And I learned one of the most powerful lessons of all. It is not selfish to honor your limits. It is wise. Because when you leave a gathering at 30% instead of 1%, you recover faster. You maintain healthier relationships, and you show up more fully the next time. Too often, introverts push themselves to depletion, believing it is what's required to fit in. But in truth, sustainable connection comes not from constant presence, but from intentional presence. This is about quality over quantity. I also began tracking patterns. Which environments drained me quickest? Which interactions left me energized? How long could I engage before needing solitude? The patterns were illuminating. Crowded, high-stimulation settings depleted me fast. Unstructured group time without clear purpose wore me down. Extended stretches without alone time led to burnout. Conversely, deep one-on-one conversations recharged me. Purpose-driven collaboration filled my cup. Quiet time for reflection restored me fully. Armed with this awareness, I started designing my life differently. Not to avoid challenge, but to manage energy strategically. Just as you plan your day around meetings and tasks, you can plan around energy needs. Schedule alone time before and after high-drain events. Protect blocks of focused work where interaction is minimal. Choose social settings that align with your energy style. And crucially, learn to say no, not from avoidance, but from wisdom. When you honor your natural rhythm, you show up more authentically. You deepen your presence in the moments that truly matter. And you release the constant tension of trying to be someone you are not. Managing energy is not about retreating from life. It is about engaging with life in a way that is sustainable and true to who you are. This is the beginning of moving from survival mode to intentional living. And it all starts by asking, again and again, what energizes me and what depletes me? Next, we'll explore how embracing this awareness can unlock your greatest natural strengths and help you bring deeper value to every space you enter. One of the most liberating shifts that happens when you begin to honor your energy is this. You stop seeing your quietness as a shortcoming, and you start recognizing it for what it truly is, a strength. In a culture that often confuses speaking frequently with adding value, introverts can feel misplaced. But let's be clear, depth is not a deficit, and silence is not emptiness. Your mind is designed for nuance, reflection, and connection-making. These are not minor traits, they are essential in a world drowning in noise. Consider how many of today's challenges arise from rushed decisions, shallow analysis, and reactive thinking. Now more than ever, we need the thoughtful presence that introverts naturally bring. When I first began to shift my perspective, I noticed something. The times when I stayed quiet in meetings were often when I was absorbing the full complexity of the conversation, seeing connections others missed, considering angles that were being overlooked. And when I finally spoke with intention, and only when I felt ready, those contributions carried weight. That is the power of depth over frequency. It is not about how often you speak. It is about what you bring when you do. Introverts are not disengaged, they are discerning. Not absent, but observant. Not reluctant, but reflective. Once you embrace this, the question shifts. How can I create conditions where my natural depth adds value? Sometimes that means preparing insights in advance. Sometimes it means choosing smaller group settings where thoughtful dialogue is possible. Sometimes it means allowing yourself the time to process, trusting that your contribution will be all the stronger for it. When you stop apologizing for needing space to think and instead own it as part of your contribution, everything changes. The world does not need more noise. It needs more clarity, and clarity is born in stillness. So the next time you feel the urge to fill a silence, pause. Ask yourself not what will make you visible, but what will make you valuable. This is the quiet power of the introvert, and it is more needed than ever. There is a common misconception about introverts that we dislike people. But that's not true. We value connection often deeply. What we struggle with is draining interaction. The key is not to avoid social life, but to design it with care. This begins with a simple but profound shift, choosing quality over quantity. For much of my life, I thought I had to attend every gathering, accept every invitation, maintain a wide circle of acquaintances even when it left me depleted. But once I began tuning into my energy, I saw the pattern clearly. Large, unstructured events drained me. Small, purposeful gatherings restored me. Shallow, small talk depleted me quickly. Deep, one-on-one conversations nourished me. So I began to choose differently. First, I identified the people who energize me, those rare individuals with whom conversation flows naturally, where silence feels comfortable, where I leave feeling lighter rather than heavier. I prioritized these connections. Second, I reimagined the context in which I socialized. Instead of loud, chaotic environments, I chose spaces where meaningful interaction was possible: quiet cafes, walks in nature, shared creative activities. And third, perhaps most importantly, I built in intentional recovery time around social engagements. It is not selfish to do so. It is what allows you to show up fully when you do engage. When I began applying this approach, something remarkable happened. My relationships improved because I was no longer forcing myself to stay in situations that depleted me. I wasn't arriving already exhausted or half present. I wasn't counting the minutes until I could leave. Instead, I brought genuine energy and attention to the connections I chose to nurture. And yes, sometimes this meant saying no. Sometimes it meant canceling plans. But true friends value presence over performance. They would rather have you fully engaged occasionally than half-heartedly available all the time. Building a sustainable social life is not about isolation. It is about alignment. When you choose connections that honor your energy, you create space for relationships that are not just maintained, but deeply meaningful. Workplaces, much like the wider world, often celebrate the loudest voices. Open-plan offices, constant collaboration, endless brainstorming sessions. For many introverts, these environments can feel draining, even overwhelming. And for a long time, I believed I needed to adapt, to speak more in meetings, to network more aggressively, to be visibly engaged at all times. But the more I forced this version of myself, the less effective and the less authentic I became. Then I asked the question that changed everything. How can I leverage my introvert strengths rather than compensate for them? And the answers shifted the way I approached my work entirely. First, I began to honor my need for quiet focus time. Rather than apologizing for stepping away from the noise, I protected space in my calendar for deep, uninterrupted work, and my productivity soared. Second, I approached networking differently. Instead of trying to compete for attention in crowded rooms, I focused on building genuine one-on-one connections through thoughtful follow-ups, shared interests, and authentic interaction. Over time, these relationships proved far more valuable than a stack of business cards ever could. Third, I changed how I contributed in meetings. Rather than trying to speak frequently, I prepared insights in advance. I chose moments carefully bringing substance and clarity when I did speak. And I noticed something powerful. When you contribute with intention, people listen. You do not have to dominate the conversation to have impact. You simply need to ensure that what you bring carries value. Many successful introverts thrive not because they become more extroverted, but because they design their professional lives in alignment with their natural strengths. They create roles that leverage their focus, empathy, and analytical depth. They communicate their needs clearly, building environments where they and their teams can thrive. So if your workplace feels challenging, remember this. You do not need to change who you are to succeed. You need to understand who you are and build from there. That is where your quiet power truly lies. Transforming your relationship with introversion doesn't happen through one big shift. It happens through daily practices, small rituals that honor your natural rhythm. One of the most powerful changes I made was in how I began each day. I used to wake up and immediately reach for my phone, email, news, social media. Before I'd even connected with myself, I was reacting to the world. Now, I begin with reflection. Even 15 minutes of journaling, meditation, or quiet solitude creates a foundation of calm. It centers me, giving me clarity before the demands of the day arrive. Another key practice is strategic scheduling. I no longer stack meetings back to back. I intentionally build in time between interactions to recharge, to process, to breathe. I protect blocks of deep work. And I treat solitude not as empty time, but as essential restoration. Your alone time is not a luxury. It is the space where your best thinking, your creativity, and your resilience are nurtured. Environmental design also plays a role. I create spaces that support focus using headphones as a signal when I need uninterrupted time, choosing quiet places to work when possible. And at the end of each day, I practice a gentle transition. Rather than collapsing into bed with my mind still racing, I take time to wind down, perhaps with a walk, a creative activity, or simply sitting in stillness. These small choices make a profound difference. When you design your day around your energy, rather than forcing your energy to fit your day, you move through life with greater ease and far greater authenticity. Because in the quiet spaces, your true self is strengthened, not diminished. In the end, learning to honor your introversion is not about limitation. It is about liberation. For so long, many of us carry the weight of expectations that were never truly ours. Trying to be louder, trying to be more visible, trying to fit into a rhythm that leaves us depleted. But the question that changed everything for me remains simple. What energizes me and what depletes me? When you ask this with honesty and then act on what you discover, something remarkable happens. You begin to build a life that supports you, not drains you. You deepen your relationships, choosing quality over quantity. You contribute more meaningfully because you are working with your strengths, not against them. And slowly, gently, you come home to yourself. This is not a linear path. There will be days when you overcommit, times when old patterns pull you back, moments when others misunderstand your choices. But each small act of alignment, each time you say no when you need to, or choose solitude without apology, strengthens your foundation. You begin to realize that your introversion was never the problem. The problem was trying to live out of sync with your nature. When you live in harmony with your design, life flows differently. Not louder, but deeper. Not faster, but more meaningfully. So I invite you to hold this question close. What energizes me and what depletes me? Let it guide your days. Let it shape your choices. Let it honor who you already are. Because freedom is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming fully, unapologetically you. And so, as you move forward from this quiet reflection, I invite you to carry one gentle truth. There is nothing wrong with needing space. There is nothing wrong with craving depth over noise or solitude over crowds. You are not here to perform. You are here to live fully, meaningfully, in a way that honors who you truly are. Remember, this is not a race to become someone else. It is a slow, unfolding journey back to yourself. Ask the question often, what energizes me and what depletes me? Listen closely to the answers. And trust that by aligning your life with your natural rhythm, you are creating something far more precious than approval. You are creating peace. Thank you for listening and for walking this path of quiet clarity with me. Until next time, move gently, live fully, and know that your quiet power matters.